It's the Underdogs back with you, and it's an unimportant week here at the show. Nothing big going on. Hi, Peter Keating. I'm Jordan
Hey,
Brenner. What's
Jordan, this
going
is
on?
great. This is great. You know why this is particularly great? Because the whole world has opinions about Super Bowls. And I know that we're supposed to believe that the bigger a market is, the more efficient it is. But no, 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 no. This is our chance to actually gain an edge over all the people who want to bet on Gatorade colors, right? And give you some actual insights into some stuff that might give you a little bit of a head start on the billions of people who think they know what they're talking about.
So it is Super Bowl week. Game can't come fast enough. A little bit later in the show, we're going to get into some philosophies on how to bet the game if you're so inclined. But first, let's just talk in general about this matchup, what we're expecting from the game. Chiefs are favored by 1.5 against the Eagles. The total right now is sitting at 48.5. And Peter, as we said all year, the Chiefs are here. Oh, wait. No, we've been telling you every week that it was smoke and mirrors and that regression was going to catch up with them. And I was sure Buffalo would exploit it. And here we are.
It didn't work when I was for the Washington Huskies a couple of years ago, but I'm wearing purple again in solidarity with who I thought was the best team all year in the NFL, the Baltimore Ravens. They could not overcome enough to make it to this game. Buffalo was so close. And look, one of the arguments you can make for the Chiefs is that they're peaking at the right time. I think their game against Buffalo was their best game of the year after we had a lot of valid reasons for questioning whether what they were doing was sustainable.
So I think if you look at this game, in my mind, Philadelphia is the better team. They've got a more talented roster, fewer holes, more positions of advantage. If you're betting on Kansas City, you're doing it for two reasons: Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes. And God knows it has not been profitable over time to go against them.
It has not. I just want to give you some extra credit because you're always talking about the trenches and the lines and how the offensive line is the foundation of everything. Jordan, the Eagles have a better offensive line and a better defensive line than the Chiefs. And if you have an advantage on both sides of the line of scrimmage and a really cool quarterback and a plus 46 advantage in explosive plays, which is what the Eagles amassed this year, is very hard to say that anything intangible or unquantifiable can outweigh that. I am sorry. I will point out something I pointed out last week, which is it's a mind-blowing statistic to me, which is that in NFL history, there's a couple of hundred quarterbacks who have gone into the fourth quarter losing more than 25 times, have careers that massive, and one of them has a 500 or better record in those games, and that's Patrick Mahomes. He does pull it out of the fire. We have to give him, Andy Reid, and I think Spagnuolo, possible credit as the greatest of all time at their positions. But I like what Philadelphia's lined up for this game against Kansas City.
Let's try to poke some holes in Philly for a second, okay? If that's possible. One thing that's interesting is for as dominant as they looked last week against the Commanders, they did not exactly play the toughest slate of opponents on the road to the Super Bowl. Okay, they played a Packers team that I think finished the game with no wide receivers, and and that opening drive turnover really changed the entire complexion of the game because the Packers actually outgained the Eagles. The Eagles only gained 290 yards, only scored 22 points, 7 of which was a gift off the fumble on the opening kickoff. Not the most impressive. Then they played the Rams, who are not a great team by any measure, at home, and the Rams had the ball, right, with a chance to win. And then obviously the Commanders game, they scored 55, but that Commanders defense is a joke. We've
And
seen
the game just got away from them. I mean,
yeah,
turnovers,
yes,
right.
turnovers and bad defense, and they couldn't stop the run. I guess what I'm saying is, A, are the Chiefs the best team by far they'll have faced in this run? And B, the only defense I'd say that's above average they faced was the Packers. So I think the Chiefs defense is more along the lines of the Packers. Does that mean the Eagles offense can be contained more than we've seen so far?
The Eagles offense? I'm not sure because analytics has always said for the past 15, 20 years, teams should be passing more instead of running, right? That's basically because the average of all the good things that can happen when you pass is better than the average of all the good things that can happen when you run, minus the bad things that can happen, right? It's really simple. When you're as explosive as the Philadelphia rushing game has been this year, you can rush as often as they do and gain more than by passing, and that has changed the balance of what an offense can do. I don't think it's really replicable for other offenses, but it has worked for them. And if you can contain Barkley and that offensive line up front, you have some pretty tough matchups with their wideouts. So I'm not sure. Where I'd be concerned is that Jalen Hurts has a career high pressure to sack rate this year. I think if you can get to him, and I'm not sure he's fully healthy either, and we have not seen him play anywhere near his best in the playoffs at all. And I just wonder if he's at 100% and if that Kansas City defensive line can get to him. That's what I would worry about if I was Philadelphia.
I think the key is Chris Jones, interior pressure, being able to. I'm not sure about the pass blocking from the Eagles guards, but I'm interested in pressure on the other end and how Kansas City is going to scheme things up, because here's what we know. One, KC's offensive line is and has been compromised. Kicking Joe Thuney out to left tackle has at least somewhat solidified that position from a pass blocking perspective compared to the other options, but it's really destroyed their run game. They're not going to be able to run much in general. He was a great run blocking guard, not so much at tackle. Lots of people have touched on that. That's a problem. 2, the Eagles can generate pressure. 3, the Eagles have 3 really good corners and can man up and put pressure on the receivers. So this, to me, speaks to an Andy Reid. It's got to be an Andy Reid masterclass in terms of scheming and getting people open, playing, running quick routes, getting rid of the ball quickly, and B, Mahomes improvisation. The one thing you notice with the Chiefs, and they did it last year at this time with Rashee Rice, and now you're seeing it with Xavier Worthy, is they most of the year they spread things out. They've consolidated their passing attack much more around Worthy and Kelsey. Not sure how much you're going to get out of. I think Hollywood Brown's an interesting X factor, but I'm not sure what you're going to get out of DeAndre Hopkins and Juju Smith-Schuster in this game. But Andy Reid will have some wrinkles here. He always does.
Yes, but Jordan, if anybody hasn't paid close attention to the Eagles, this is not the Eagles defense from 2 years ago or last year. The end of last year, they were getting gashed up the middle with passes over the middle all the time. This is a secondary remade fantastically in 1 year. And also, you mentioned pressure. Jalen Carter has been monstrous. Now, maybe I'm overrating Carter because I love it when teams bring in players who are supposed to be problems in the draft and then just maximize their talent. Laramie Tunsil, Jalen Carter. I mean, Jalen Carter is the superstar he should always have been, and we kind of thought he was going to be. And I'm also really impressed by the makeover they gave to the secondary in 1 year. You talk about how long it takes to develop guys. It's been an amazing. So maybe I'm overrating that, but their second and third level defense has been pretty freaking awesome.
All right. So we've set up how we see the game. That should translate into how we bet the game. I want to get into that after this break. We're back, and it is time for everyone's favorite segment, the Under of the Week, which is brought to you by DraftKings. Hey, what's better than watching football and basketball on the weekend, Peter? Nothing. Oh, wait, watching it with the DraftKings Sportsbook app in your hand. That's better. Our partners at DraftKings are hooking up all new customers who bet $5 instantly with $150 in bonus bets. So, Peter, with that being said, give us an under.
Jordan, what do I do to keep you happy? I do things like I stay up late scouring the internet to find YouTube videos of people singing the national anthem to figure out whether we should bet the national anthem. We should in this game. Now it's Jon Batiste, musical genius. Everybody, according to all accounts, a nice guy. I'm sure it's going to be a great performance. His over-under is 120.5 seconds. And I am saying, give us the under. Now look. There's a few wild cards here. One is the guy can play any instrument in the world. So is he going to bring out a piano? By the way, you can bet on that. So minus 400, he's going to bring out a piano. But he might bring out a kazoo. He might bring out a recorder. He might bring out a marching band. We don't know. But here's the deal, Jordan. If he brings out musical accompaniment, the time of his singing will begin not from the moment he begins playing, like an overture or an improv or anything like that, but from the moment he begins singing, "Oh, say, can you see?" So that's one thing to keep in mind. Here's
Noted.
another
Noted.
thing. When
Musically
he
noted.
when he sang at the U.S. Open, 106 seconds. When
Hmm.
he sang at the NBA All-Star Game, 86 seconds. It's actually pretty hard to take more than 2 minutes to sing the national anthem. Last year, Reba McEntire, 84, 89 seconds. I think we're gonna go with the under here. You gotta be careful. When Chris Stapleton sang 2 years ago, he hit the original over, but by then the line had moved up. So some of these betting lines are, kind of movable and not necessarily official. But Jon Batiste, singing time under 120.5 seconds.
Well, I know these are your favorite types of bets. The silly, they call them novelty props, available in some states and not others. Um, any before we actually get into the game and a theory I want to talk about, is there anything else that's caught your
Uh,
fancy on the
First of all,
novelty?
my favorite of all of these bets is whether someone is going to cry, player or a coach is going to be caught on camera crying during the national anthem. And the reason that this is a whopping minus 670 for yes is
Hmm.
because the whole world thinks Nick Sirianni is going to burst into tears because 2 years ago he could not contain himself during the national anthem. So
Mm.
it's a great bet, but there's no value there. I do want to mention one crazy game related bet, which I know you think is basically frivolous. But you know this octopus bet, Jordan, where
Yes, that's where a player scores a touchdown and gets the 2-point conversion on the
right,
same following
right.
it. Yeah.
Now, look, in a game where the 49ers were in the Super Bowl, that made no sense because there's a plethora of options and threats. But look, this year, who led the league in 2-point conversions? Saquon Barkley. Who had an octopus 2 years ago in the Super Bowl? Jalen Hurts. Who's always a threat to catch and then make another catch? Travis Kelsey. It's plus 2,000. I think if there's ever a year to go with the octopus, it would be with these two teams. So I'm kind of jazzed about that. It's a silly but fun but extreme long shot bet, which could pay off.
Well, you have me thinking about calamari now, but so we're going with the octopus.
I'm going with the octopus. What the hell?
All right. Well, what the hell? If you're going to bet the game a little more conventionally, I want to talk a little bit about a theory behind it, and we actually have an article out on at the Athletic. You should look for more in-depth information on this. But essentially, if you're betting, and especially if you're doing a same game parlay, which generally is not a good bet long term for bettors, but is lots of fun. So if you're going to do it, just don't expect to be profitable long term, but enjoy it. Um, if you're betting, you need a theory of the case. You need your bets need to tell a story because you're looking for correlated events, especially when building a parlay, right? So, easy example, like you probably don't want to hammer three receivers overs for the Eagles, right? You don't want to do Goddard over his yards and AJ Brown over his yards and Devontae Smith over his yards because they're coming at the expense of each other, right? That's the obvious example. But what you're looking to do in your head is come up with a game script, okay? So start with how you think the game is going to go. Are the Chiefs going to win in a blowout? Are the Eagles going to win the blowout? Is it going to be a close game? And then you build from there. So we wrote about this, for instance. Let me give you my favorite example. Let's say you think the Eagles are just going to throttle them or at least win by multiple scores, okay? A couple things are probably true then. One, the Chiefs aren't going to be running the ball much. They don't have a good running game to begin with. And if you're in a trailing game script, you're not going to be running the ball up the middle, handing the ball off. Mahomes is going to be dropping back, passing, looking to catch up quickly, right? You need a lot of points, you throw the ball. So if that's your theory of the case, you're going to want to bet an alternate line for the Eagles, say -8.5, right? More than one score. B, you're going to want to take Kareem Hunt's under in rushing yards. I think the last I saw was 45.5, right? And then the
Hmm.
other thing is, okay, if the Chiefs are throwing more and Kareem Hunt isn't running, well, what are they doing at the running back position? They're probably playing Samaje Perine, who's their third down back, a lot more in the passing game. And what are the Eagles doing in that situation? Well, they're probably laying back, trying to prevent the big play, giving up dump offs. So suddenly, Perine's props, which I've seen like plus 170 for over 1.5 receptions and like over 7.5 yards, I think are the lines, are totally viable in that sort of a game script. Now, you would never bet that if you think the Chiefs are going to win and win big. But the point is, if you build a storyline in your head and then reverse engineer it, a lot of bets
Yes,
pop up.
yes. Yeah, that is the key to making these make sense. You work backwards from what you think is going to be the script from the game to the various plays and to the components that will add up to that result. You know, try to figure it out going forward because that just makes no sense.
So we sort of we ran some analysis looking at different ranges of what these teams won by and who popped up. So why don't we start with you? What was the most noticeable trend you saw in either direction, whether it was one team winning in a blowout or a close game, in terms of one player's statistical trends in those directions?
Well, what much more than I expected. When the Chiefs won big, they won big in defensive clampdowns. The Chiefs won 5 games by more than 2 scores. They didn't break 30 points in any of those games. Mahomes had an average of about 248 yards in those games, basically exactly equal to his seasonal average. What they did was they stopped opponents from scoring almost completely in the first half. Average of 5.2 yards in the first half they gave up. Didn't give up more than 18 points in any of those games. They got a huge amount of pressure on the opposing quarterbacks. They outsacked their opponents 18-8 in those games. You mentioned Chris Jones before. In the games where the Chiefs won big, George Karlaftis ran wild, 7 sacks in those 5 games. And you can get him to have a sack or more at, I think, about 130, plus 130, plus 135, which is an interesting bet. But basically, the Chiefs got their opponents in a hole, did not let them get easy first downs in the first half, led at the first half of each one of those games, and then went on to win by a bigger margin. So you can also get the Chiefs to be winning if you're interested in this, if you see that what's happening, and you can see it happening. If the Eagles don't pick up a couple of first downs early, the running game stalls, because that can happen to anybody, right? Then the Chiefs pick up a small lead and then grind out a bigger and bigger lead. It's a good bet to bet the Chiefs to be winning at the end of the first half as well as at the end of the game. I also think what was interesting was that in those blowouts, they kept throwing to Kelsey. They kept moving the chains with Kelsey. And I think there's a particular scenario here where you can see the Eagles. The Eagles gave up 16 targets and 11 catches to Zach Ertz. They're trying to limit explosive plays, but they're giving up a lot of plays underneath. And I think in the scenario where you see the Chiefs scoring, it's going to be because Kelsey keeps moving the chains. And I think the over-under on his number of receptions is only 6.5. So anything 7 or above is plus money and a good bet if you think the Chiefs are going to be moving the ball.
Yeah, no, for sure. I want to talk a little bit about the Eagles' passing game for a second, because it's a consolidated attack. You're really looking at 3 guys: A.J. Brown, Dallas Goedert, Devontae Smith. Jahan Dotson's out there just, I don't know, to, run around for a little while and be ignored.
Trade bait.
So a couple trends in those guys. First of all, A.J. Brown, it's really interesting. Far better bet if you're banking on an Eagles blowout win. In games where they've won by more than 1 score, he has cleared 84 yards in 6 of their 8 those multi-possession wins. His total right now is sitting at it's up to 70. It was 69.5 when we wrote our story. It's 71.5 now. But if you think the Eagles are going to blow them out, there's some real value there, at least according to what he's done in other blowouts. The flip side is in close games. Look, the Eagles run the ball more than anyone, right? And in close games, they're up to about a 59% rush rate. Jalen Hurts is barely cracking 200 yards in those types of games passing. Not a lot to go around, and A.J. Brown's numbers have suffered in those contests. He only surpassed 69.5 is what I had, 71.5. Now he only cleared that number in 2 of 7 games, aside by 8 points or fewer. So his under is very viable. The flip side is Dallas Goedert has been one of the most popular props if you sort of at least read the articles that are written about where people are betting. His numbers at 52.5, and even it's funny. Normally, it's hard to find value in overs in the Super Bowl because so many casuals are betting, and it moves the line up because people want to bet overs. But I still think you can totally justify taking Goddard over 52.5, especially when you consider that the Chiefs have given up more yards to tight ends than any team in the league. And if you look at
say that again, the Chiefs have given up more yards to tight ends than any team in football.
right,
That's not just because they're playing from ahead or behind. They're open over the middle against Kansas City.
right. So Goddard, 52.5 receiving yards, 4.5 receptions. And if you want, you can ladder up there with alternate totals and go for the gold. So I found those two things very interesting. But I think we should also talk about Saquon Barkley, right? Because, I mean, first of all, well, let's just take a step back and just say how amazing it is that a guy's rushing prop is as high as Saquon's is. It's currently sitting at 112 and a half.
112 and a half. Wow.
At DraftKings. But it feels warranted watching this guy and what they've been doing, right?
Yes, and we've heard that the Chiefs haven't given up a game to a 100-yard rusher, 100 yards to one rusher in forever, but they've given up total rushing yards to several other teams. Even the teams that they beat by more than 10 points kept running the ball against them and got more than 5 yards a carry. So and last week Cook would have and should have had a lot more yards.
Don't even get me started. We've covered that.
Yes. Yeah. So, I mean, I think it's warranted. I will say, here's one fun thing about Saquon for any of you bitter Giants fans or anyone else looking to bet on an under. Saquon had 120-something targets his rookie year and 90 catches. He was a safety valve for Eli Manning in his first couple of years. That's just not part of the Eagles' games. The Eagles do not screen to him. His receptions total, I think right now, is sitting an over-under of 2.5. The under on his catches might be the only under I would take on him.
Well, and so it makes sense. Teams with very mobile quarterbacks typically don't throw. Running backs are safety valves, but so is scrambling.
Right.
So you'll find that with lots of other teams, right? That with a Lamar Jackson, same thing. They're not throwing to the backs on third down as much. For what it's worth, Barkley, the one scenario where I would fade his rushing prop is a Chiefs blowout win for the obvious reasons that there's game script would dictate fewer runs. It's hard to clear 112 and a half rushing yards if you're down multiple scores and you've got to throw to get back in the game. But in Eagles blowout wins where they've won by multiple scores, he's cleared that prop 5 of 8 times, and in close wins, it's actually even better. I think he's 6 out of 8. So yeah, Peter,
with a couple of 200-yard games in there somewhere, right? Yeah,
right. So yeah, it's and the other interesting bet in close games, Barkley has had 2+ touchdowns in 4 of those 8 games. So that becomes an interesting bet. I think it's around +200 for him to have multiple touchdowns. And I'm fresh off a win with him on 3+ touchdowns. So maybe we'll go back to the well again.
Jordan, you used an interesting word before. You said that the Chiefs have consolidated their passing game, and we should mention Xavier Worthy, who's +155 to score a touchdown anytime. Reed loves the gadget plays. They get the ball to him on the ground. They let him run the ball a couple of times a game. His targets are way up. His usage in the playoffs are way up. He's a really interesting candidate to do some damage.
Yeah, no, I mean, way up is way up. I think he's gone from after week 14 or something from 4.9 targets a game to 8.8. His route run rate is up from 75% to 88% in the playoffs. And like you said, tons of gadgets. We've seen it with lesser players. You like to bring up Kadarius Toney.
Yeah. They've been looking for a reliable guy to play the Kadarius Toney role, and they've developed him. They developed Worthy into just that. It's pretty cool.
They will find interesting ways to get the ball in his hands, and he's had a lot of touches inside the red zone. So yes, I love Worthy's anytime touchdown bet at +155. And Peter, it's always logical when I'm talking sports with you. Just makes my day, and now I feel ready for the Super Bowl.